I'm Ginger Zee, and you are about to see some stories of true heroes. Coming up, unexpected bravery in Houston, Texas, as hurricane floodwaters overwhelm one tight-knit community.
Hurricane Harvey, one of the most devastating storms of our time.
Everyone's at risk, kids, adults, even beloved pets.
My house is flooding, my dog is there, somebody's gonna have to go save him.
Find out what happens when one man jumps into action to save his neighbors from the rising water. In late August of 2017, a tropical storm named Harvey was brewing in the Gulf of Mexico. It rapidly intensified and became a major hurricane. Inside, winds of more than 130 miles per hour, and it would soon drop record amounts of rain on southeast Texas. As people watched with anticipation, they had no idea that there were so many heroes that would rise up as the waters kept pouring down. Nottingham Forest, Texas. On any given morning, neighbors in this quiet suburb of Houston are out in the streets, walking their dogs and making sure their kids catch the bus to school. But as Hurricane Harvey drew closer, the people of Nottingham Forest began to prepare for the worst. Local law enforcement agencies didn't want to take any chances.
Before the hurricane hit, we had attempted to prepare as best we could. We operate some military-type equipment, Humvees, 5-ton trucks. We had them readied and staged in preparation of what we thought would be some minor street flooding. We were not expecting the torrential amount of rainfall that we got throughout the storm.
It's got to be in your heart. It's got to be in your blood. These first responders put their lives on the line for all of us. Each and every day, they do it without hesitation.
While first responders readied themselves, Don Paulo and his neighbors would soon learn what it means to truly be a community.
Never would I expect I would find my entire community in the middle of a federally declared natural disaster area.
It was raining, and it was raining hard, but we live in a tropical environment, and so it didn't seem unusual.
Hurricanes, like Harvey, begin as a group of thunderstorms called a tropical wave. This group of storms feeds off the warmth and moisture of the ocean air. They rise to form more storms, and then they're replaced constantly by the surrounding air. Below all of the air rising, low pressure develops. Riding along the trade winds and rotating counterclockwise, the storm is going to keep growing as long as it has warm water, no land, and very little wind shear. After Harvey made landfall, it barely moved, creeping through southeast Texas. Streams and rivers began spilling out of their banks. People watching this slow-moving disaster had to make the difficult decision of whether to stay or to evacuate their homes, including one mother facing her worst fear. Julie Leach and her friends were hoping to go on an excursion, but when the storm quickly approached, they had second thoughts.
I kept saying, oh, you know, the hurricane probably won't come. We should just try to go. But she ended up canceling it.
We certainly knew from the weather reports that this was going to be rain like we'd never seen before, but we didn't have a great reference point to understand what that looked like in our neighborhood.
As Hurricane Harvey made landfall, Houston, Texas, and surrounding areas began to prepare for a direct hit. The hurricane had rapidly grown from a tropical storm to a Category 4 hurricane. Hurricanes are rated on the Saffir-Simpson scale, a Category 1 being the lowest, with a maximum wind speed reaching 95 miles per hour, and 5 being the highest, with winds beyond 157 miles per hour. As Harvey escalated to a Cat 4, with max sustained winds over 130 miles per hour, it now had the potential to do catastrophic damage and force deadly storm surge onto the coast.
Recently, natural disasters have cost the U.S. over $300 billion annually. Hurricane Harvey, in and of itself, cost the United States $125 billion, one of the most devastating storms of our time.
First responders were understandably on edge.
When the storm started coming through, I was on the engine. We had some responses to some small tornadoes that were taking place south of the station here.
With Harvey, it wasn't size, but speed, or more precisely, the lack of speed that caused the catastrophic flooding. And even after the storm finally moved east, the rain that fell upstream had to drain to the ocean, which caused even more flooding.
It had started raining pretty good. My son was at work. He got home and actually wanted to go out that night, and I said, please don't, God, I need you to be home in case something happens. And then I asked him to take the first shift.
All the flash flood warnings were coming on, and so I was kind of watching the house first. And throughout the night, as the hurricane was hitting, I started seeing the water start coming up.
By 1 o'clock, I woke up to all this noise, and my son was putting furniture on blocks and up on top of the cabinets. I sat on the staircase and just watched the water, and it just rose and rose and rose.
Conditions were getting worse. Many parts of Houston were beginning to flood, and reservoirs where floodwaters usually gather runoff were slowly rising toward the brink of breaching.
I was kind of worried, and I didn't think about it to turn off electricity in the house. And that was what I was fearful of, because I could hear all the electrical things in the house making noises. The buzzer in the washing machine or dryer was going off the whole time. It was just very loud. Just listening to the water rush in, you could hear it in the walls. It was like a waterfall in the walls.
About 6:15 in the morning, Don walks in our bedroom and he yells, "Get up, get up." And I was like, what's going on? He's like, you have to come out here and see this. I walk out the front door and there's a raging river down our street. I mean, water like as far as you could see.
Nottingham resident Chris Groh was out of town watching the live news coverage.
We had gone to Austin to move my son into college. We left our dog Rhodey in the house. We had a teenager in the neighborhood who was gonna come and walk him. The next morning we woke up to a phone call from my neighbor who said, "Chris, your house is flooding." I knew that Rhodey was there, and we had left him downstairs, so he wouldn't have been able to get to any type of higher ground.
The forecast sounded like a broken record, a nightmare with no end in sight for the relentless rain. And now, there was a new urgency. Some reservoirs were near capacity and began to spill over. The Army Corps of Engineers made the difficult decision to open the spillways, flooding some neighborhoods to prevent the dams from breaking, which then would cause widespread flooding over a much larger area. The decision had been made to flood Nottingham Forest.
More and more calls coming in. We started getting medical calls in neighborhoods that we can't get to anymore because of the high water in the roads.
So I told Chris, you've got to go over there. Rhodey's there and he can't get away, so you're gonna have to go get him. And he said, well, I can't. There's a river running between your house and my house. There's just no way I can get over there. So I just wrote a message that said, my house is flooding, my dog is there, he's not gonna be able to get away, somebody's gonna have to go save him.
When disaster strikes and when terror is facing us, we are all running out. Heroes selflessly run in and put themselves in harm's way at our benefit, and they do it again and again and again.
When we return, find out if rescuers can save this family's beloved dog in time.
We had a kick in a back door, and then we found a 120-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback standing on top of the counter.
But first, here's a tip on how you can be better prepared for a disaster.
If you live in a special hazard flood area, such as a floodplain, have an evacuation plan in place before disaster strikes. And always remember to stay out of floodwater. It only takes a few inches of rapidly moving water to knock a person over. Prepare, plan, and practice. It's never too early to prepare for the worst.
Hurricane Harvey engulfed southeast Texas in record amounts of rain. Though the storm had passed, the accumulation of all that water upstream was now flowing toward the neighborhood of Nottingham Forest. First responder agencies were completely inundated, so one group of locals had to do what they could to help one another before it was too late.
We saw the streets had flooded, and then my wife had seen that there was a neighbor that was dog sitting, couldn't get across the street to get a really large dog out of the house. We got to talking, and I was like, well, I can go get it with my canoe. And Michael Berg, who was the HOA president, said he would join me, and he came down to the house, and the two of us headed down the street in our boat.
First responders always need to think of their community's needs first and their own needs last.
Social media can get a bad rap, but in a storm, it can help save lives, increasing communication and raising awareness. Many first responders use it to connect with their communities.
As soon as I responded to the post and I said, oh, we have, Don has a canoe, he's gonna come get the dog, we'll let you know. And then my phone started blowing up. You have a boat? Can he come get us? Can you send him to my friend's house?
Now aboard the canoe, Don and Michael made the treacherous trip to Chris Grove's house to rescue Rhodey. But with the waters rising, they had only minutes to make the save.
We had to kick in a back door, and then we found a 120-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback standing on top of the counter, something you're certainly not expecting in the least.
Don and Michael evacuated Rhodey from the home and let Chris know that her cherished dog was safe. Now, back in the canoe, the work was just beginning for these unexpected rescuers.
I had some other neighbors who were also getting out, and there was a canoe coming. And so I got a hold of her and I said, could you send the boat to us next? Because we need to get out. Dawn showed up with another boat, so 2 boats showed up, and I got in the canoe with the 2 dogs. And then they start pulling away. I'm like, wait, my kids. And they're like, no, the other boat will get the kids.
The dogs were going frantic, and so she figured, just get the dogs out of the water, let them calm down, and then, we'll get into the boat.
By that point, I was in tears because I was scared and I didn't know what was going to happen next.
As the flooding continued, neighborhoods turned into lakes.
We were sending in people on whatever vehicles we could, whether it was fire trucks because they're a little bit higher, or people would have kayaks, canoes, stuff like that. Eventually got to the point where even these trucks can't get places. Just more and more calls coming in, people needing rescue.
The Houston Fire Department ended up performing more than 7,000 rescues and answering more than 15,000 emergency calls.
Sometimes it's hard. As you're driving through a neighborhood with 5 or 6 feet of water in it and you haven't had any contact with your own family and you live here, you wonder what it's going to look like when you get home.
There you go. Hang on.
A hero to me is somebody who's got the emotional capacity to help a stranger, while their own families could also use a little bit of help, but they've recognized that that person, that stranger, needs it right now.
It's hard to imagine a normally dry street or a suburban neighborhood with 5, if not 10 feet of water flowing through it.
We had houses that had probably 4 and 5 feet of water in them at that point. It was really, every neighbor had to go help each other.
The neighborhood of Nottingham Forest was unrecognizable after 2 solid days of rain and the release of water from the levees. The question became, what will be left of their neighborhood when the water drains? Coming up, the process of cleaning up proves daunting.
I could have never imagined this in a million years.
But first, another disaster safety tip.
If you fear that your house is going to flood, it's wise to go and turn off the main circuit breaker. The circuit breaker or fuse boxes should be located easily by you in advance. Additionally, if your house has flooded and there's standing water, please do not enter that house unless you know that circuit breaker has been turned off, because you may be putting yourself in danger by doing that.
It was August 25th, 2017. Harvey made its first landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. 24 hours later, it had barely moved. The heaviest bands of rain began inching across the Houston suburbs, swallowing the small town of Nottingham Forest, a neighborhood where heroes emerged in the heart of the crisis.
It took weeks for the water to recede and months for everyone to clean up. It was a natural disaster nobody here will ever forget. But the people of Nottingham Forest also realized just what a special community they all share.
I could have never imagined this in a million years. These types of catastrophes and disasters were just only what you saw on television. I mean, we had 3 feet of water or more in our house for 2 weeks.
We kind of viewed ourselves as the Nottingham Forest Navy. The pride and spirit in trying to help each other as much as we could was overwhelming. I've probably cried more for the generosity of friends and neighbors than I have for what I've lost.
Communities are united, and the efforts that we see going on, neighbor helping neighbor, stranger helping stranger, friend helping friend, bring these vibrant communities back and thriving again and going forward.
Harvey dropped 27 trillion, that's trillion with a T, gallons of rain across Texas. 135,000 homes were damaged or destroyed.
After a year, I've become accustomed to this is what my neighborhood looks like. It'll have green lawns again and construction trucks won't be around, but this is normal now.
During cleanup following a natural disaster, there are many precautions that those affected have to be aware of. Some can even cause serious health problems. Disaster restoration companies specialize in not only reconstruction, but carefully handling the dangerous after effects of natural disasters.
After floodwaters recede, mold and mildew can grow almost anywhere if not dried and treated properly after a catastrophe. Mold spores may lead to serious health problems, including coughing, wheezing, and upper respiratory infections. It's best to leave the treatment of these mold spores to the experts.
We decided to tear down the house. We were one of the lucky ones that had insurance, so we've decided to build a smaller home on the same lot.
This is the lot where myself and Michael Berg canoed to on the first day, August the 27th. This was where they sent us to rescue their dog, Rhodey.
When I think back to Rhodey's rescue, Don and Michael really put Rhodey and our family ahead of themselves and very selflessly went out and actually risked their lives.
Rhodey was a true survivor, and Chris was so grateful she got to spend a few more months with Rhodey before he was unfortunately diagnosed with cancer and passed away.
We decided that we wanted to get another Rhodesian Ridgeback, and so we got Jax, and he has brought a lot of joy to our lives.
The people of Nottingham Forest share a special bond, and new heroes have emerged through selflessness and the desire to help those in need.
This is what I came to be known as, an Uber. My wife would dispatch me to various people's houses, and she would text them and say, your Canoeber will be there in 15 minutes. I would conservatively say I carried at least 100 people in my canoe. It sure served a purpose.
So from us to you, Don, thank you for saving Lucy and Katie. It really means a lot. We really appreciate what you did for us and for everyone else out there.
Coming up, an emotional but well-deserved reunion to the survivors of Nottingham Forest.
We're just all looking forward to getting back to what we used to have here.
A year after Hurricane Harvey devastated Nottingham Forest, the rebuilding is far from complete, but the neighbors gather for a celebration and to express their appreciation for what no storm could take away from them, the affection and gratitude that they feel for each other and their neighborhood.
The homes are still being constructed, people still aren't back, but yet there's a lot of progress. So I like to think positively to show that all of this is because people are together and they want their neighborhood to be back together, better than it was before. It's a great feeling. It's less of looking at Harvey as a devastation and more of seeing it as a rebuilding phase.
This neighborhood was always a very close neighborhood. Since this happened, it's tripled the amount of community we feel now.
When you live in a good neighborhood, everyone knows everybody, and now everyone just knows everybody a little bit better.
It's been proven that the faster the physical cleanup and restoration happens following a disaster, the faster the psychological wounds heal within those affected. Though it may take time, the human spirit will prevail.
It's an anniversary. It's not something you necessarily celebrate, but maybe you celebrate the way a neighborhood came together to rescue itself.
We're just all looking forward to getting back to what we used to have here.
Hey, how are you? Don came to our family's rescue. I'm so thankful. A hero is someone who goes out of their way to help someone else and does it selflessly. This neighborhood is a wonderful place to live, and because of people like Don.
This is what we learn from devastation. It's not the end. It's the new beginning that can be bigger and better than what we once had. We've got to be prepared. We've got to engage ourselves, commit, and go forward, knowing that we can make a better tomorrow.
Where there's tragedy, there is almost always a hero. Don Paulo rescued more than 100 people within his community in Houston, Texas. And to those he saved, he'll always be remembered as the one who rose to the occasion. I'm Ginger Zee. We'll see you next time.